Success is not built in the bank account. It is first built in the mind. A man can inherit $1 million and lose it in a year, but give that same man a winning philosophy, and he will build $1 million again. Why? Because the mind is the factory of wealth, and the thoughts you allow inside it are the blueprints of your future. The tragedy is not that people don't have enough money. The tragedy is that they don't have enough vision. They see limitations where they should see possibilities. They cling to excuses when they could be holding opportunities. And if you don't learn to master your mind, life will master you. So tonight, let's talk about developing the kind of mindset that doesn't just make money, but builds freedom, creates success, and leaves a legacy that outlives you. You don't get paid for wishing, you get paid for value. And value starts in the mind. If you want wealth, you have to train your thinking, because money without mindset disappears. But mindset without excuses, that builds freedom. So, let's train the mind first, and the bank account will follow. Freedom is the real prize of wealth. Too many people chase money for the sake of appearances, cars, clothes, and gadgets that shine for a moment but fade quickly. But the true value of money is not in what it buys, but in what it allows you to choose. Freedom is the ability to wake up and decide how you will spend your day, who you will spend it with, and what work you will give your energy to. That is the ultimate goal. Without freedom, wealth is just a golden cage. To build freedom, you must shift your strategy from possessions to options. Ask yourself, does this purchase bring me closer to freedom or lock me deeper into obligations? Instead of chasing liabilities, build assets that provide cash flow and security. Each dollar invested wisely buys back a piece of your time. Each step toward financial independence is a step away from dependency. Here's a practical way to start. Define financial freedom for yourself in one simple sentence. For some, it's retiring early. For others, it's working without pressure. Once you define it, align your goals with that vision. Because wealth without freedom is just wealth, but wealth with freedom is life. Winners don't simply stumble into wealth, freedom, or success. They think differently long before they act differently. The way you and I think determines everything about the way we live. If you try to live a rich life with poor thinking, it won't work. You can't build a mansion on the foundation of a shack. Your thoughts are the blueprint of your destiny, and if the blueprint is wrong, the building will collapse. So the first step to winning in any arena, money, relationships, health, or freedom, is to learn how to think like a winner. When I was young, I used to wonder why some people had so much while others barely got by. I thought it must be luck, or family background, or maybe even unfair circumstances. But then I learned something that changed my life. It wasn't the circumstances that determined wealth. It was philosophy. It was how a person thought. Give two people the same opportunity. One sees a problem, the other sees a possibility. One says, I can't, the other says, how can I? That little shift in thinking makes all the difference between surviving and succeeding. Now here's the challenge. Your current life is the harvest of your past thinking. If your thoughts have been small, your results will be small. If your thoughts have been filled with limitation, your results will be limited. But the good news is, you can reprogram your mind. Every day, you and I have the opportunity to plant new seeds of thought. You do it with what you read, who you listen to, and the words you repeat to yourself. If you fill your mind with success-driven ideas, eventually your actions and results must align with those ideas. That's why I always say, stand guard at the door of your mind. Be careful what you let in. If you're listening all day to negative people, consuming noise that drags you down, you can't expect to rise up to wealth and freedom. But if you surround yourself with books that challenge you, mentors who inspire you, and words that remind you of who you're becoming, you've already separated yourself from the crowd. The winners are not those who simply had more talent. They're the ones who consistently thought on a higher level. So, let me give you a practical challenge. Don't just let this idea stay in theory. I want you to sit down today and write 5 empowering thoughts you want to live by. 5 philosophies that lift you higher. Maybe it's, I am capable of building wealth. Maybe it's, my time is valuable. Maybe it's, I create solutions and attract opportunities. Whatever they are, write them down and repeat them to yourself every morning. Why? Because what you repeat, you believe. What you believe, you act upon. And what you act upon becomes your life. If you want to live differently, you must first think differently. Winners think differently long before they act differently. Excuses are interesting things. They sound so good when we say them. They make us feel justified. They even help us avoid the sting of responsibility for a little while. But here's the truth. Excuses don't pay bills. Excuses don't build houses. Excuses don't buy freedom. The marketplace has never once paid out a check for excuses. It pays only for value, contribution, and results. You see, excuses may comfort you in the short term, but they will drain you in the long term. Responsibility, on the other hand, builds. Responsibility is what creates change. Responsibility is where wealth begins. When I was in my early 20s, I was full of excuses. I told myself, I don't have the right education, I wasn't born into wealth, the economy's tough, I don't know the right people. And while all those things felt true, the truth behind the truth was this. I was using excuses to avoid responsibility. I thought life was supposed to change for me, but I learned later that life doesn't get better until you get better. That was a hard lesson. But the moment I stopped defending my excuses and started embracing responsibility, things began to turn. Because the moment you take responsibility, you put yourself back in control. Responsibility says, no matter where I start, I can build. Responsibility says, I may not control the weather, but I can control the sails. Responsibility says, if it's to be, it's up to me. That mindset will do more to change your financial destiny than any lottery ticket, than any miracle break, than any wishful thinking ever could. Because when you own your life, you own your future. Let's talk about the marketplace. It doesn't care about the reasons you didn't show up. It doesn't care about why you're late. It doesn't care about your excuses for not saving, not investing, not learning. The marketplace has one measurement: value. You bring value, you get paid. You build assets, you earn freedom. You solve problems, you gain wealth. Excuses rob you of the very energy you need to create results. Responsibility channels that energy into building. So, here's a practical step for you. Sit down with a piece of paper and write your top 3 excuses when it comes to money. Maybe you've said, I don't make enough, or I don't have the time, or I don't know where to start. Be honest with yourself. Now take each of those excuses and replace them with an actionable commitment. Instead of, I don't make enough, write, I will save 10% no matter how much I make. Instead of, I don't have the time, write, I will track my hours this week and reclaim wasted time for wealth building. Instead of, I don't know where to start, write, I will read 1 book on finance this month and take the first step. When you replace excuses with commitments, you reclaim your power. The day you trade excuses for responsibility is the day you begin to build wealth, freedom, and success. Wages are important. They put food on the table, they keep the lights on, they take care of today's needs. But if all you ever rely on is wages, you'll work your entire life for survival and never taste the freedom that wealth can bring. Wages create a living, but assets create freedom. That's the great distinction. You see, a paycheck will sustain you, but ownership will liberate you. Freedom doesn't come from how much you make in wages, it comes from how much you own in assets. When I first started out, I thought a bigger paycheck was the answer to everything. If I could just get a raise, if I could just find a higher paying job, then I'd finally be set. But here's the reality. You can increase your wages, and the bills will increase right along with them. You make a little more, you spend a little more. That's why so many people, even with great salaries, still feel trapped. They've built a lifestyle on wages, but not a foundation on assets. It took me years to learn that true wealth doesn't come from working harder for wages. It comes from using those wages as seeds to plant in assets that grow, multiply, and eventually work for you. Think of wages as the shovel, not the harvest. Wages are what you use to dig into the soil and plant. But the harvest, freedom, wealth, options, comes from the assets you nurture over time. That's why the wealthy don't just think in terms of hours and paychecks. They think in terms of ownership. They own businesses, they own real estate, they own investments that pay them whether they're working or not. That's the difference between making a living and making a life. Now, here's the strategy. Instead of treating your paycheck as something to be consumed, treat it as capital. Every time you earn, take a portion, 15 to 20%, and put it into something that produces. Stocks, bonds, real estate, even a side business that you can grow over time. At first it may feel small. You might think, what difference does 15% really make? But it's not just the money, it's the habit. It's the discipline of telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Over time, those seeds begin to sprout, and one day you'll wake up and realize that your assets are producing income on their own. That's the beginning of freedom. The day money works for you instead of you working for money. Let me give you a picture. Imagine you take $200 a month and invest it consistently over the years. That may not sound like much, but with time and compound growth, it can turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's just one stream. Add another in real estate, maybe a rental property that produces monthly income. Add another in a side venture that grows into a business. Before you know it, you've built a foundation where your assets cover your bills and your wages become extra. That's the point where work becomes optional, where life is lived on your terms, not dictated by your paycheck. So here's the practical step. Don't wait until you're making more money to begin. Start now. Take 15 to 20% of your wages, no matter how small, and redirect it into assets. Make it automatic if you can, so you never even see it as spending money. Remember, wages will feed you, but assets will free you. The question is, will you spend your life feeding yourself, or will you plant the seeds that one day buy your freedom? The choice is yours. One of the great secrets of winners is that they don't try to do everything by themselves. They understand that effort alone will never make them free. You can only work so many hours. You can only spend so much energy. And eventually you reach a ceiling. That's the trap so many people fall into. They think the only way to get ahead is to push harder, work longer, and do more. But the truth is, you'll never achieve greatness by simply adding hours to your schedule. The winners know something different. Leverage is the secret multiplier. Leverage means multiplying your results beyond your own two hands. It's about using people, systems, and tools to expand what you can do. Think about it. If you mow your own lawn, you've saved a few dollars, but you've also used up precious time you could have spent building something that pays you for years to come. Winners ask, What can I delegate? What can I automate? What can I systemize so that I can focus my energy on the things that create the greatest returns? That's leverage. In my early years, I thought success was all about me doing the work. If I wanted results, I had to push harder, stay up later, grind it out. But I eventually discovered that wealth doesn't just belong to the hardest worker. It belongs to the smartest builder. When I began to leverage systems, when I began to build teams, when I began to let tools work while I slept, that's when my results started multiplying. I wasn't trading time for money anymore. I was building machines, human and mechanical, that could work for me around the clock. Leverage shows up in many forms. A business owner who hires a team multiplies their efforts through people. An investor who puts money into a stock that pays dividends is leveraging capital. An entrepreneur who uses technology, automation, marketing systems, online platforms is leveraging tools. And the best part is, leverage creates freedom. Instead of being chained to every task, you're free to direct your energy toward vision, strategy, and growth. That's where your unique value shines, not in doing everything yourself, but in creating systems where value is multiplied. Now here's the strategy. Begin to look at your life and your work through the lens of leverage. Ask yourself, what am I doing repeatedly that could be automated? What am I doing that someone else could do for a lower cost, while I focus on higher value tasks? What systems could I create so that things run smoothly even when I'm not there? Winners build once, then let the system work for them again and again. Losers build once, tear it down, and start over every day with nothing to show for it. Let me give you a practical example. If you're trying to save money, don't rely on discipline alone. Automate the savings. Set up a transfer that happens every month without you having to think about it. That's leverage. If you're running a small business, don't answer every customer inquiry yourself. Set up an automated email system or hire a virtual assistant. That's leverage. If you're building a brand, don't post every piece of content by hand. Use scheduling tools that let your marketing work for you while you sleep. That's leverage. You see, leverage doesn't just save you time, it creates wealth. Because the hours you free up can now be invested into the activities that grow your assets, expand your influence, and compound your results. Without leverage, you'll always be capped by your own effort. With leverage, your impact becomes limitless. So here's the step you can take right now. Pick one financial or business task, just one, and automate it this month. Maybe it's your savings, maybe it's a bill payment, maybe it's part of your marketing. It doesn't matter how small it seems, because once you taste the power of leverage, you'll never go back to doing everything alone. Winners don't just work harder, they multiply smarter. And that's how you move from effort to freedom. One of the most profound lessons in life is this: your income is directly tied to the size of the problems you solve. Small problems bring small paychecks. Big problems solved well bring big rewards. That's the way the marketplace works. It doesn't care about your need. It doesn't reward your excuses. And it doesn't hand out checks based on how long you've struggled. It rewards value. And value comes from solving meaningful problems for more people. If you can train your mind to look at the world this way, you'll discover that wealth is simply the natural outcome of contribution. Think about it. A person who flips burgers solves a very small problem, feeding one person a meal, and the marketplace pays them a small wage. But a person who builds a system that feeds millions of people at scale, well, the rewards are massive. That's not luck. That's leverage applied to problem solving. The bigger the problem, the bigger the impact, and the bigger the paycheck. When I first understood this, I stopped asking, Why am I not making more? Why am I not making more? And started asking, what bigger problems can I solve? That shift in mindset changed everything. But here's the strategy. You must deliberately train yourself to look for problems others overlook. The average person complains about problems. The winner looks at the same situation and says, there's an opportunity here. Every frustration in the marketplace is an open door for someone bold enough to bring a solution. Think about the world we live in. Transportation, communication, health, education. Each of these industries has produced fortunes because someone identified a need and solved it for the masses. Wealth flows toward problem solvers, like rivers flow toward the ocean. Let me share a personal reflection. Early in my career, I thought hard work alone would win the day. I worked long hours, trying to outgrind everyone else. But the truth is, no matter how hard you work, if you're solving the wrong problems or very small ones, your results will always be limited. The turning point came when I realized I had to lift my eyes from just working harder to thinking bigger. I asked myself, what's a problem that 1,000 people are facing right now, and how could I bring an answer? That question was a catalyst. It forced me to stop trading sweat for pennies and start thinking like a builder of solutions. Now, practically, you can do this starting today. Write down 3 problems in your field. Real frustrations, inefficiencies, or unmet needs that people around you face. Don't filter them. Just get them on paper. Then brainstorm possible solutions. Maybe you can't solve them all right away, but you don't need to. All wealth begins with the seed of an idea, and those seeds grow when you nurture them with focus and effort. You might be one idea away from transforming not only your life, but also the lives of many others. Remember this truth: the world doesn't reward you for how badly you want wealth, but for how well you solve problems that matter. Winners stop chasing money and start chasing problems, because they know money is simply the applause for creating value. So if you want bigger rewards, don't shrink from challenges. Go find bigger ones to solve. That's the doorway to both wealth and significance. There comes a moment in life when you realize that the finish line isn't how much you've collected, but how much you've created that will outlive you. Too many people measure success by the size of their bank account or the car in their driveway, but let me tell you something. No one at the end of their life looks back and says, I wish I had bought a bigger television. What truly matters is legacy. Legacy is the story people tell when you're gone, the seeds you plant that grow in someone else's garden, the wealth of wisdom and resources you leave for the next generation. A winner's mindset doesn't stop at building wealth. It asks, how can I build something that lasts? See, success is not only what you gain, it's what you leave behind. If all you do is earn, spend, and repeat, then your wealth dies when you do. But if you take the time to build not just assets, but principles, values, and a framework for living, then your influence goes on multiplying long after you've left the stage. Think about it. Buildings crumble, money can be wasted, but principles, discipline, generosity, responsibility, these can echo through generations if you model them consistently. I remember when I first started to succeed financially, I thought about what my own family had left me. It wasn't money, it was lessons. My parents didn't have much, but they taught me discipline, they taught me honesty, and they taught me the importance of hard work. And those principles were worth more than any inheritance. Later, as I began to accumulate some wealth, I asked myself, what am I going to pass on? Just the dollars or the wisdom to multiply them? And I realized the answer had to be both. The wealth can give opportunity, but the wisdom gives longevity. Without wisdom, money evaporates. With wisdom, Even small resources grow into abundance. That's why strategy is so important. Don't just build wealth for yourself. Build systems that can carry on. Build businesses that create opportunities for others. Create trust structures to protect assets. Write down the principles you want your children to live by. Sit with them and show them, not just in words, but in action, what it looks like to save, to invest, to give, to grow. The tragedy is too many people leave money without instruction, and what was earned in a lifetime is lost in a few years. Winners don't make that mistake. They build a roadmap, a framework that says, this is how we continue long after I'm gone. So here's a simple, practical step you can take right now. Write down 3 financial principles or assets you want to pass to the next generation. It could be always save before you spend, invest in assets, not liabilities, or give at least 10% of what you earn. Maybe it's a rental property, a family business, or a portfolio you're building. Whatever it is, don't just write it down, begin modeling it today. Your children, your family, the people watching you, they're not listening to every word, but they are observing every action. Show them how it's done. Because here's the truth. The ultimate measure of success isn't the car you drive or the house you live in. It's the legacy you leave. Winners think beyond their lifetime. They don't just build wealth, they build a story, a foundation, a vision that future generations can stand on. And that's the kind of success worth chasing. Most people overestimate what they can do in a year and dramatically underestimate what they can do in 10 or 20. That's the quiet, invisible magic of compounding. Albert Einstein once called compounding the 8th wonder of the world, and he wasn't exaggerating. It's the principle that allows small, consistent contributions to grow into fortunes if you give them enough time and discipline. The trouble is, most people want fast. They want results today, rewards tomorrow, and freedom by the weekend. But wealth doesn't work that way. Real wealth whispers. It doesn't shout. It grows slowly, often unnoticed, and then one day it towers over you like an oak tree from what was once just an acorn. I remember when I was young and someone explained compounding to me in the simplest way. They said, if you put aside a small amount each month, even as little as $50, and let it grow at a modest rate of return, by the time you're older, it won't just be money, it will be freedom. At the time, I laughed. $50 seemed too small to matter. But later, I saw with my own eyes what consistency plus time could do. Those who started early and stayed steady were the ones who didn't have to worry later. Meanwhile, those who kept saying, I'll start next year, or when I make more, then I'll invest, found themselves decades later with nothing more than excuses. The philosophy is simple. Small streams become mighty rivers if you don't interrupt their flow. If you start early, even with little, and you stay consistent, compounding takes over. You don't need miracles. You don't need jackpots. You don't need luck. All you need is patience and discipline. Think about it. If you invest a modest amount each month, and it grows by just 8% annually over a lifetime that can turn into hundreds of thousands, even millions, not because you were brilliant, but because you were consistent. Wealth isn't about intensity for a season. It's about consistency for a lifetime. That's where strategy comes in. Compounding works best when you don't interrupt it. Too many people start investing, then panic when the market dips, pulling their money out and breaking the chain. But the wealthy understand the downturns are part of the journey. Compounding is like planting seeds. You don't dig them up every few months to see if they're growing. You trust the process, water them, and give them time. Winners think in decades, not in days. They don't rush the process because they understand the math of patience. So here's the practical step. Open or review an investment account this week. Don't wait until you have thousands saved up. Start with $100. Start with $50. Start with whatever you can. The point isn't how much you begin with. The point is that you begin. Once the habit is established, it becomes easier to increase the amount. But without starting, compounding has nothing to multiply. Because here's the truth. Compounding doesn't reward those who wait to start. It rewards those who start and then wait. And the sooner you begin, the richer the harvest you'll one day reap. Most people say they want to be wealthy. But when you ask them where their money went last month, they shrug their shoulders. That's not wealth, that's wandering. And wandering never leads to freedom. Wealth follows those who track it, because what gets measured improves, and what gets ignored almost always declines. The same is true in health, in business, in relationships, and certainly in money. If you don't know where it's going, you can't possibly control where it ends up. I remember when I was younger and struggling financially, I thought the answer was to make more money. I thought if I could just earn a little more, then everything would be fine. But the truth was, I wasn't managing what I already had. The moment I made more, I spent more. The cycle didn't end until I learned the discipline of tracking. The first time I sat down to actually record every expense, I was shocked. A coffee here, a quick meal there, a subscription I forgot about. None of it seemed big on its own, but together, they were stealing my wealth. It wasn't a lack of income holding me back. It was a lack of awareness. The philosophy is simple. Money is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. And the way you make it your servant is by keeping your eye on it, giving it direction, and measuring how well it obeys. Think about it. The wealthy don't just make money, they manage it. They know where every dollar is going, and because of that, their dollars multiply. The poor spend unconsciously, while the wealthy spend intentionally. One is accidental, the other deliberate. And life rewards the deliberate. That's why the strategy is so important. Regularly review your income, your spending, your savings, and your investments. Think of it as a report card for your financial life. You wouldn't run a business without checking the books, yet most people run their lives without ever checking the numbers. No wonder they're confused when freedom never comes. Winners create a rhythm, a weekly check, a monthly review, a yearly adjustment. They look at the flow of money, they adjust what's not working, and they double down on what is. That kind of clarity creates confidence, and confidence creates momentum. The practical step is simple but powerful. Set aside one evening each week to review your personal financial statement. If you've never done this before, start by writing down all your income and every expense for the past week. Where did it go? What patterns do you see? Which dollars worked for you and which dollars worked against you? Then, over time, expand this review to include your savings rate, your investments, and your long-term goals. Treat it like an appointment with your future, because that's exactly what it is. It may feel tedious at first, but soon it becomes liberating, because once you track your money, you begin to see opportunities. You spot waste. You find extra dollars you can redirect into assets. You start to take control instead of living in confusion. And when you live with clarity, wealth has a way of following. Most people believe that wealth is a direct result of effort, that if they just push harder, grind longer, or work more hours, riches will eventually follow. But effort alone, no matter how sincere, has limits. You can only stretch yourself so far before you run out of time, energy, or even health. The truth is, you can't scale yourself, but you can scale systems. Systems are what separate the busy from the wealthy, the exhausted from the free. It's not about how much you can do in a day, but about what you can design to work for you even when you're not there. I remember the early days of working multiple jobs, giving everything I had to stay afloat. But the moment I stopped and asked myself, what could I set up once that would keep working even when I'm asleep? Everything changed. That's when I realized the difference between activity and leverage. Systems don't care if you're tired. Systems don't call in sick. Systems don't ask for overtime. They just keep running faithfully, consistently, creating results. The wealthy don't rely on endless personal effort. They rely on well-built systems that compound their efforts into freedom. The philosophy here is clear. Wealth is not built on the strength of your back, but on the strength of your design. If your plan requires you to always be present, you don't have a plan. You have a job. And jobs are fragile. One illness, one layoff, one downturn, and it can all collapse. But systems create resilience. Systems turn income into investments automatically. Systems turn small daily actions into long-term results. Systems don't just free up your time, they multiply it. The strategy then is to begin building repeatable processes in every area of your financial life. In business, this might mean creating a system for marketing, sales, or delivery so that revenue continues without your constant push. In personal finance, it means building automatic transfers into savings or investments so discipline becomes effortless. In investing, it means setting up recurring stock or real estate purchases so that consistency replaces emotion. Winners don't leave their wealth to chance or mood. They create structures that guarantee progress. The practical step is simpler than most imagine. Automate at least one wealth-building habit this week. It could be setting up an automatic transfer of 10% of your income into a savings account. It could be a monthly contribution into an investment portfolio. It could be using a budgeting app that categorizes your spending without you lifting a finger. The point is to put one system in place that runs without your constant oversight. Then, as you grow, you add more systems, layer upon layer, until your life is surrounded by processes that work while you live. Over time, something remarkable happens. You stop asking, "Did I remember to save?" Because the system already did it for you. You stop wondering if your investments are consistent because the plan is already in motion. You begin to notice your wealth growing quietly in the background while you focus your energy on bigger visions. That's the beauty of systems. They give you freedom today and security tomorrow. So remember, hard work may bring you a paycheck, but systems bring you freedom. Build them wisely, and they'll serve you for a lifetime. One of the most powerful truths about wealth and success is that we don't rise in isolation, we rise in association. You've probably heard it said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that's not just a catchy line, it's a law of human behavior. If you spend your days with people who complain about the economy, who believe money is evil, or who treat spending as a sport, don't be surprised when you find yourself echoing the same habits and the same results. On the other hand, if you spend your days with people who talk about opportunities, who study investments, who are building dreams instead of buying distractions, then you'll feel a pull upward, almost without effort. The philosophy is simple. Your associations shape your expectations, and your expectations shape your reality. If the voices around you are small, your vision will shrink. If the voices around you are bold, your vision will expand. When I was younger, I had to make a very difficult decision. I realized that some of the friends I enjoyed most were also the ones holding me back the most. They were satisfied with just getting by, satisfied with weekends that drained their wallets but never built their future. And I had to ask myself, do I want to be liked by them, or do I want to be lifted by someone else? That shift, choosing new associations, changed everything about the direction of my life. The strategy is to become intentional about your circle. Winners don't just fall into great company, they build it. They seek out mentors who have walked the path they desire to travel. They spend time with investors who think decades ahead instead of days ahead. They connect with dreamers who see possibility where others see limitation. And here's the key. You don't always need their approval to belong. You just need their example to inspire you. Sometimes, just observing how a wealthy, disciplined person makes decisions is enough to rewrite your entire approach to money. The practical step is to begin replacing one draining relationship with one wealth-building relationship this year. This doesn't mean you abandon every friend who isn't on the same path. But it does mean you make a conscious trade. If you're spending hours with someone who discourages your ambition, replace some of that time with someone who fuels it. Maybe it's attending a seminar where investors gather. Maybe it's joining a mastermind group. Maybe it's simply asking someone successful to lunch and learning how they think. One intentional relationship can be worth more than years of wandering with the wrong crowd. Over time, you'll notice the shift. Your conversations change. Instead of talking about what you bought, you're talking about what you built. Instead of discussing what you owe, you're discussing what you own. Instead of focusing on survival, you're focusing on strategy. And here's the real beauty. As your circle grows stronger, so do you. Because in the end, wealth isn't only about money, it's about mindset, environment, and influence. And the right people will shape you into the kind of person who doesn't just earn money, but multiplies it and sustains it for a lifetime. Choose your associations wisely, because the company you keep today is the prophecy of your future tomorrow. One of the greatest lessons I've learned in life is that money has motion. It is not meant to sit still forever. When it flows, it grows. When it's hoarded, it begins to stagnate. Think about a river. When the water moves, it stays fresh, full of life, nourishing everything it touches. But when water pools with no outlet, it turns stale, it dries up, it loses its power to give. Wealth works the same way. If you grip it too tightly, fearful of losing it, you begin to shrink instead of expand. But if you learn to let it move through you, through contribution, generosity, and service, you'll discover it multiplies in ways that surprise you. The philosophy is simple. Wealth hoarded dries up. Wealth shared multiplies. The reason is rooted deep in human psychology and in the laws of the marketplace. When you give, you activate trust. You create goodwill. You invest in relationships, in people, and in communities. And those seeds always come back in some form, sometimes in opportunities, sometimes in friendships, sometimes in unexpected returns. But they do come back. I remember early in my career, when I barely had enough to cover my bills, I still made it a practice to give something away. It wasn't the amount that mattered, it was the habit. Giving trained me to believe there was more where that came from. It trained me to operate from abundance, not scarcity. The strategy, then, is to dedicate a portion of your income, not after everything else is covered, but right at the start, to contribution. The size of the amount doesn't matter as much as the consistency of the act. You can start small. $5, $10, 5% of your income. The point is not to impress others with your generosity, but to impress upon yourself the principle of circulation. Think of it as oxygen for your wealth. The more freely you allow it to move through causes, family, or opportunities for others, the stronger and more alive your financial life becomes. I've known people who waited to get rich before they gave, and they never did either. And I've known others who gave when they had almost nothing. And over time, they seem to attract both wealth and fulfillment. The practical step is clear. Set aside 5% of your monthly income for giving, no matter how small it starts. If you earn $100, set aside $5. If you earn $1,000, set aside $50. And don't wait for the perfect cause. Choose something meaningful now. Help a neighbor, support a local charity, fund a scholarship, or even create small opportunities within your own family. As you make this a practice, not only will you feel wealthier, but you'll also become wealthier in ways money alone can't measure. Because wealth that only feeds you will eventually run dry, but wealth that flows through you will last a lifetime and beyond. Remember this: contribution is not money leaving your life. It's money planting seeds for a richer harvest. At the end of the day, wealth is not just about numbers. It's about the life you create, the freedom you gain, and the impact you leave behind. The difference between those who wish and those who win lies in discipline, responsibility, and consistent action. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start today. Save a little, invest a little, grow a little, and watch it multiply over time. Replace excuses with commitments and dreams with plans. The future is built today, not tomorrow. So take control, build assets, live free, and let your success become your story of freedom.